You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup County Councillors Caucus Roundtable with me, Paul Brophy. Unfortunately, my colleague Cllr can't join us this evening, but we're talking with our county councillors, the forgotten powerhouse of the Irish political system. All politics starts at grassroots within our communities. Joining us on episode 3 of the Councillors Caucus here on the Irish Political Roundup, we're delighted to be joined by Councillor Michael Sheehan, who's an independent councillor on Wexford County Council, who has been an elected representative for 26 years. And we can credit you, Michael, for coming up with the title County Councillors Caucus. Also joining us this evening is Councillor John Leahy, who is an independent councillor on Offaly County Council and is the current Cathaoirleach of Offaly County Council, and has been a county councillor since 2009 and is a former leader of Renew Ireland. And joining us for the first time on the Councillors Caucus is Councillor Gerard Sheehan of Aontu, who is a member of Fingal County Council. Gerard is one of 8 councillors Aontu has across the country, and he was first elected in June 2024. Can you all hear me? Yeah, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. It's a busy time with at local county council level, and so Michael, we'll start with you. You had 2 motions in front of Wexford County Council, one on inheritance tax and one on animal cruelty or Stouts law, and they're both successfully passed.
Yeah, I did, Paul, and thanks for the invite, and it's great to be back with you all again. Yeah, we had look. This week is very busy because we had our plenary session at the county council, and then straight after that, on Wednesday we had the municipal. So it's been like one meeting that started on Monday morning. It just hasn't ended. But yeah, a couple of things coming up, and I think John and Gerard probably be in the same fashion. We're in the budget season, which means we're caught with tight deadlines. So there's a window of opportunity in terms of whether you set the property tax, what rate you set of that, and then the timeline. So it's kind of it's a ticking clock, and we have a limited 2 to 3 weeks to get the budget through the statutory process and then onto the meeting. So that's kind of like the elephant in the room that we're kind of talking about, but not talking about yet. But yeah, in the meantime, we had a full agenda, and we had lots of motions on different areas. But the two I had, and the two I was kind of keeping an eye on, and I've been working on for quite some time, as you and John and Russian would have known, we would have spoke about it. One is Stouts law. And Stout was a puppy that went into a foster family and was born with physiological and all sorts of defects going on. And in fairness to the family, they took the living best care of the dog. But unfortunately, due to the circumstances in which it was born and the circumstances around it, the poor dog had to be put to sleep. So there is a movement out there called Stouts Law, and it's Stouts Campaign. And what we're looking for is to change to the Agricultural Act to allow simply to put in a regulator that would regulate the conditions on which dogs would be bred other than a registered. So if you're a registered breeder, you'd have absolutely nothing to worry about. But if you're a backyard breeder, it's trying to capture all of them in under one regulator. And it says, listen, you can't breed a dog before a certain age. You can't breed a dog a certain amount of times per year. And there's only a certain age you can breed a dog up to. And after that, you don't. So it's like, it really does enshrine the welfare of the dog, the welfare of the animal, the welfare of and I didn't get to say it. I can say it here, but I didn't get to say it in the council chamber. You got to take care of the bitch. So, the welfare of the bitch and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I spoke to some of the councillors over the weekend at a training conference, and they wanted to be just assured that this does not put another layer of regulation on top of those people who are already doing what they're required to do, and it does not. So they were quite happy with that. So thankfully, it passed unanimously. It went through, and there was no issues with it whatsoever. So, and what I try to do with all my motions is that if the motion is passed, that we circulate it to all local authorities in the country. So, the two lads can keep an eye on their agenda. It'll be heading their way now at the next monthly meeting. They'll get, as it is with all these things, they'll get correspondence from Wexford County Council saying at the October meeting, the following motion was passed. And it's up then to the other local authorities then to take up that. But it really is something that we need to look at, particularly in the run up to Christmas, particularly in post-COVID, with the amount of either dog pounds or WSPCA been full to the brim. Like, we really kind of need to knuckle down on this. We are a nation of dog lovers, don't get me wrong, and we love our animals. And for those who have dogs and cats, like, they are members of the family. So to hear and see any dog or any cat suffering is just intolerable cruelty, and that's what it does do. So that was the first one. And then the second motion, Paul, again, we spoke to it with the councillor from Cork, whose name escapes me now at the moment, but we spoke about the
Albert
EDIT campaign. Yes, there you go. Albert, we spoke about the EDIT campaign, which is the End Discrimination of Inheritance Tax. And this now, keep an eye on this in the new year, because I think this thing is going to flare up to no end. Because, as you may be aware, if you have a child, a son or a daughter, you can leave up to €400,000 in your estate before they pay inheritance tax. However, if you don't have an immediate descendant, or if you don't have any children at all, 40,000 is the limit you can leave. So there is as I would argue, a discrepancy. It's a discriminatory part of the law that has to be rectified. And what we're looking for is Minister Jack Chambers, because of the expenditure, and Minister Norma Fola, because it is equality at the end of the day, to come together and to agree a protocol and a framework that we would harmonise the band rates. And I know, John, we spoke about it the last time. You've been an auctioneer and all that jazz. You'd have a good understanding of this. Like, it really is unfair that, like, if you're a married couple and want to leave something to a niece or a nephew, the threshold is 40,000. And if you're, a couple of any description, same sex, different sex, whatever, and you don't have any children and you leave it to a niece or nephew or a carer, it's still only 40,000. So it really is a punitive oversight of legislation, and it's something that we're having to rectify. So that too, you'll be happy to hear. And I thank Lisa MacDonald, who's a solicitor here at Wexford Town. She's on the county council with us, and she backed it. And again, it went through. So, it's gone through. Now, one area where we did have a bit of a bang is we have, now, as you know, I'm in New Ross, which is it has the most inland port in the country at 32 kilometres from the sea. And we had a request from the Defence Forces to upgrade and change our bylaws in New Ross Port to allow for the importation of ammunition and munitions. So as you can tell, I guess, given the current environment of everything in Europe and everything in the world, that sparked off a hell of a bang, no pun intended. And to be fair, Councillor John Dwyer, who's on the municipal with me in Ross, had a very valid point about the importation of ammunition and the importation of arms and where is this all going to lead. And to be fair, Eamon Hoare, the Director of Service, was very clear. He's like, look, this was a request from the Defence Forces to harmonise and to bring New Ross Port in line with all the others, that if in the event they need to import ammunition, subject to the licence, subject to the criteria, subject to everything else that's safeguarding the importation of arms, that they could, as an option, bring it into New Ross Port as they can in other ports like Waterford, Cork and Dublin. So it took off quite a bit. And you know what, the beauty, and the lads will tell you this, and hopefully Gerard has experienced it, if not he certainly will, these debates can take a life of their own, and you just don't know where they're going to go. When they go out into the middle of the floor, all sorts of things are thrown onto the middle of the floor, and it tends to be a bit of a witch hunt. But like, at the end of the day, it was a very simple proposal. The Defence Forces wanted us to harmonise the bylaws. But some councillors, there is a feeling out there that we've been slowly but surely drifting into some sort of European military alliance. And the use of New Ross Port heretofore, which has always had what we would consider locally, it's always had, like, the last choice of everything. So we imported coal, we imported fertilizer, and we imported cars. We never got any of the sexy stuff coming in through the port. And now here we feel like, the government wants to import arms through New Ross. Not quite accurate, but still, it's a valid point. So yeah, all in all, it's been a busy point. Now, there is one thing though, and it'll certainly come to John, and certainly come to Gerard as well. It'll come to all the councils. There was a provision in the budget. Now, this is the beauty. There was a provision of the budget that said, the minister announced with fanfare that we are going to get rid of the derelict sites levy. Now, the derelict sites levy is a 7% levy on property that's on the derelict site list. And there's a whole process of how a building goes on the derelict site register. Anybody wants to see it, go to your local authority website. You can Google it, or you can do a search command, and the current derelict sites list for your particular county will come up. And you can see the property, when it went on it, who owns it, and the market value if they have it. Right? Fair enough. But the budget contained a beautiful one-liner that says we are going to replace the 7% derelict sites levy with a derelict sites tax. And that tax is going to be at a minimum 7%. Now, why this is a beauty, and this why we need to watch this, is because the local authorities are responsible for putting a building on the derelict sites list. And the local authorities then are responsible for levying the charge. And when there are charges to be collected, it's collected by the local council. Under the new proposal, revenue are going to be collecting the derelict sites tax. And that money then is gone into the central government fund. And that central government fund then, I suspect, even though I haven't been told anything, I suspect what will happen is the money they collect in derelict site taxes, not levies, will go into a fund, and that fund will be used for the vacant property, the Creek and Oha, and all of the RR and the URDF. So there's a bit of a sleight of hand here where the county councils were collecting this. They're no longer going to be doing it. It'll be done through revenue, and that money will come back in indirectly to the county council, but at a much reduced rate. So there's two issues that I'm watching, and maybe the lads will keep an eye out for too. Number one, the local authorities should be the one collecting it because it's a local property. And number two, I think, different parts of the county have different levels of dereliction. I'm sure Offaly and I'm sure parts of Dublin have the same thing. So, for example, if you look at the geo-target list, which is done by the Chamber of Commerce and on Post, it'll tell you what the vacancy and the dereliction rate of properties in your area is. At the moment, New Ross is an outlier. We have 24% of our commercial buildings either vacant and or derelict. Now, that doesn't mean we're 24% derelict. But what I'm arguing is that the municipal in New Ross should be able to put a higher derelict sites tax than, say, places like Gorey, which have a much lesser element of vacancy and a much lesser element of dereliction. So it's something that, because, like, weirdly, I love this sort of stuff. I love the taxation side of it and the economic side of it. So it's something that we need to keep an eye on, because the government could be doing a twist of hand here where it looks like they're getting tough on dereliction, but really what they're doing is collecting more money that they're putting in the central pot that they're going to give back to the county councils, money that we're already getting.
Yeah, because when you look at it, you think if the revenue is being collected, but will it all go back into the local authority?
But like the minister said, he's going to get tough on dereliction and tough on vacancy and all that sort of stuff. That's fine if they back it up with money. But if they're taking money from the county councils and then giving it back to them with their other hand, that's really no benefit to us, because those schemes need to be funded centrally from the government. The URDF, which is the Urban Regeneration Development Fund, and the RRDF, the Rural Regeneration Development Fund, they're all taxpayer funded. They're all centrally funded. So if they're going to take our derelict sites money and then give us back that through the UR and the RRDF, then we're no better off.
Right, so it's just coming in one hand and going out the other, but when they're going from one end to the other, there's stuff kind of lost in the shuffle, so to speak.
Well, I think, Paul, anytime we bring in the revenue, that's a loss of power and a loss of revenue to the local authorities, because we just never get it back. Same with LPT. When the revenue collected, there are counties who don't get the money back, and there are counties that get some of the money back. And like now they're in the budget season, every county council will know how much we get from the equalisation fund. And, in the case of Wexford, we're getting 3 million back. So in that regard, that's the way revenue operates. And if they do this with the derelict sites tax, they're really not making any difference at all, because that money that's currently in the UR and the RRDF will go somewhere else, and they'll just supplement it with the derelict sites tax. So it'll look good on paper and look good in the press release, but when you get to the spreadsheets, you're going to find a hole in your finance.
Bit of creative accounting, so to speak. And
yeah, no, it's a little bit. We're going to get tough. But we come in peace, so shoot to kill.
John, you're currently Cathaoirleach of Offaly County Council, and you're also in the throes of budget season for the council. What's been coming up on Offaly County Council over the last little while, and I'm sure some of the things that Michael has said there are probably coming up in Offaly as well.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, you're dead right, and thanks, Michael, for the heads up on what's coming down the tracks on the dereliction and between the levies and the taxes. So I'll be keeping an eye on that as well, Michael. I'll be supporting anything that I see coming through in terms of the motions that you put down as well. The budget, I suppose, is the big thing for at the moment. I suppose it's Cathaoirleach. I'm probably just coordinating various meetings between the political parties and non-parties, just to see that we make a smooth transition when it comes to passing the budget on the 17th of November. Michael touched on this the local property tax, and I suppose it has been a huge bone of contention with, I suppose, a lot of the rural county councils, in terms of the government gives us an option to, you can go minus 15% or plus 15%. Now we've chosen to go 15% over the last 2 or 3 years. It's yielding us a huge benefit in terms of match funding we can draw down on. So from that point of view, we're kind of well past that hurdle, Michael. We've floated the boat on that one, and we've taken the hard hit on it in the media, and we've got through it. But I think it was the right call in terms of what is leveraging for us. I suppose what we're at the moment, Paul, we're looking at a controversial thing at the moment. We haven't raised the rates in Offaly since 2008, the commercial rates, and we're looking at maybe putting in provisions for a 5% increase. But we're trying to be clever about this in some respects and not hit the small guy. So what we're doing is we're looking at anyone that under 5,000 won't be affected, and then maybe after a certain threshold, then they won't be affected if they pay up the rates in time with that 5% levy. And then anyone that the bigger operators, then we're looking at maybe tackling them. We'd have a lot of, say, big energy companies that are in Offaly now, renewable sides of it. So we're maybe looking at maybe getting a small bit more of a dividend back in their coffers. But but we're lucky in Offaly. The finances are fairly steady. The big hit for us has been the winding down of Boardamona. That has probably seen a kind of a 1.7 million loss in our rates. But the department is subsidising that at the moment for the time being. But it's not in permanent in our, it's not in permanent fixture in our budget. In the fact that the department are saying, listen, we know you're down 1.7 because of decarbonisation, 1.7 million because of decarbonisation. We're going to just keep that in your. We're going to give that to you for the next couple of years. I think it's just kind of like, thank you very much. You've been good boys down in Offaly. We'll keep it going, but if there's nothing permanent in the budget in retaining that 1.7 million. But I suppose then touching on the renewable side of it, since we met last, we're all familiar in every county. We're all familiar in terms of looking at the wind turbines that have come up in our landscape over the last maybe 8 to 10 years. We have 550 megawatt of wind energy in Offaly, which probably equates to somewhere around maybe 10 or 15% that we're producing back to the national grid. Now, Offaly was always an energy supplier. We had the peat extraction, which kept the power plants going. So we're just going into renewables now. So it's a kind of a nice fit for us. We have a lot of bogland. We have maybe 100 hectares of bogland throughout Offaly, whereby it would just solely, just suitable for the likes of wind turbines. But the point I'm getting to Paul and Michael and Gerard is something that might stir something in your local authorities or anybody that's tuning in and listening to this, is that there's a community gain fund. When these big energy companies come in and they start putting in massive infrastructure, to have what they call a community gain fund. And now there's a near neighbour, so naturally enough, the near neighbour gets compensated for this disruption and this some people think it's unsightly and this noise or whatever the case may be with a wind turbine in close proximity. But there is an element of that goes back to the community. And what we're finding is, with the amount of wind energy projects that we're taking on, that the money's not being spent. Now we're talking about millions and millions of euros here. Like with what we've in the pipeline and what we have given planning permission for in Offaly already, we reckon that there's probably going to be 50 million of a pot over the next 20, 25 years that's going to be sitting there in this so-called community gain fund. But what's happening is the energy companies are coming and giving sponsoring a club down the road, jerseys, €3,000, scoreboard, €5,000. But that's all they're getting out of it. And this money is lying in this fund. And what we're afraid of is that the energy companies will come at a period of time and say, but should we give everything to the communities? We've X amount left. We should allow to be repurposed back into the business. So what we're trying to do is, in Offaly, we got consultants in and we got them to look at the whole landscape in terms of what's happening in Offaly, in terms of what we're generating in megawatts, what potentially is the community fund, and how best to use that community fund. So what we're doing now is we want to set up an economic development group within the local authority, within the communities, kind of a joint kind of partnership between the community and the local authority. And we want that money to filter into that, so we can buy more land for enterprise parks. We can service more lands for enterprise parks. We can give kind of finance to maybe businesses that are out there, and then maybe look after the community in a more meaningful way. because we just feel that the money is not being utilised. Like, we've lost 800-900 jobs in the last maybe 4 or 5 years in Bournemona. They're not being replaced. They're being replaced by wind turbines and solar panels, but solar farms, but they're not being replaced by physical people on the ground. So we want to use this fund to create something tangible in Offaly. And I think it's going to hit every county that has the likes of these projects. And I think if we don't consolidate the money, bring it back into some shape or form into a kind of a centralized pot, and then redistribute it back throughout in a meaningful way, I think it's going to be it's something that's going to be lost. And what's going to happen is the companies will turn around to the government or the minister of the day and say, well, listen, we tried to give the money to the communities, we gave them this, we gave them that, but they won't be getting rid of it, the vast amount that needs to be got rid of. And as again, I keep saying this, in a meaningful and tangible way. So that's kind of the big thing, Paul, that we're working on at the moment. We met with the 3 TDs that we have in our county, and basically what we put we've marked a card to say that we want a meeting with the minister in January. We will present this consultation report, and we want to set this body up, and we want him to, and literally this all it is, with a flick of a pen, he could change the policy on this, that this could be actually happen within the local authority, and then we'd start seeing money start flowing, I think, in a better way. So that's really, sorry about the long-winded end of it, but I think it's a big thing for the counties that are going to have big infrastructural projects where there's a community gain associated with it.
He's offline, is he? Well, I'll tell you, lads, you're giving me a real education here. I wish I had you 6 months ago.
It takes 2 years. It takes 2 years before you kind of get your feet under the...
I was told that Councillor, now Senator Sarah O'Reilly, had more or less said that to me. She said she was as quiet as a mouse for a period of time. I've been fairly quiet myself now as well, but it's definitely a learning process, and you'd be thrown into it. But I've already got 2 ideas there, and I don't think I'll need that letter from you, Michael. I think I'll be presenting them as motions myself, the Stouts law and the other one in relation to inheritance.
Well, if you send me an email, I'll give you what I put in. You just click a test and send it in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that'll be brilliant, because we're coming up. And just in relation to the budget as well, the other thing I find, like you were talking about the motions that you're presenting, I've one now in relation to homelessness, let's say. But I think, no, well, I'm sure enough, but there was another one, my colleague, I'm lucky enough in that I know we're only small, but there's 2 councillors in there for Aontu, so we can usually get somebody to second motions, etc. But her motion has been in there for, I think this the 3rd month now. It was in relation to the presidential election. So because it's a non-statutory motion, it's at the end of the line, and it's not necessarily dealt with. But my motion is a statutory one. It was in relation to homelessness. It was a request for a letter from the council, but that motion didn't get seen. I'd say of the 45 motions, maybe 5 or 6 of them got through at last Monday's meeting. And that's something we're finding a lot of. So we're going to the meetings. Now, the report, we had instead the chief executive's report. And so the report must have taken an hour. And you're going down through all of the documents that now, in fairness, we'd been sent previously. And it's like the budget as well. We would have been sent a breakdown of that maybe 3 or 4 days beforehand. And then you have to try and get that ready for the Monday meeting. And then there's not a chance. You're just not given enough time in it. But in relation to, for example, the chief executive's report, it's like it's a half an hour discussion on a document that, is obviously relevant and important, but it's eating into our time as councillors and with motions and with issues that we're trying to resolve. But I'm not the only one to complain about it, but I've noticed it over the time that I don't think there's been a meeting in the 12 months that has not been a number of motions just didn't even get seen. It's not unusual for 2 or 3 months to pass before your motion will get seen. But the issue that I had was in relation to homelessness, as I said, motion. And basically it's again just calling on the government. The way we are in Dublin here, the 3 local authorities, the Fingal County Council, South Dublin County Council and Dublin City County Council, all are working from the same group now. I haven't the wording, the names of the body, but my motion was effectively just again to highlight that. Since I've become a councillor, I'd say probably the number one issue that I've been addressing or trying to address with letters and emails is housing. Housing. And it's constant requests for housing. And even though Fingal County Council, like I saw on Monday night in the Chief Executive's report, are doing a lot of work, and they're showing, a number of bills here and a number of bills there, it's like it's never going to be enough. And you're sort of constantly faced with this. It's just not enough. And, even though they are doing good work, the council within themselves, but to an extent, it feels like they're restricted. And the point you were making there about the tax and changing that one word from levy to tax, and it's obvious as day, like that's more or less giving the money to the government, and then they'll be coming back giving it to you, saying, "Here you are now, lads. Wait a minute, that's the money, our money anyway." So
correct.
It's funny.
Have you, as a new councillor, have they given you your scheme or your letting scheme of priorities? Do you get a full list from your executive to say that if somebody goes to you looking for a social house, the different categories where they'll be assessed on, in terms of waiting time and medical need and physical need and all that sort of stuff? When is the last time? I mean, there's a really good opportunity for you as a new councillor to zone in on one of those and say, we look at this and, change it and bring in your changes that way.
Maybe, yeah. Now, in fairness to the council, they have been fairly good.
And unfortunately, folks, we had some technical difficulties, but we're back. Councillor Gerard Sheehan, you're joining the Irish Political Roundup County Councillor Caucus for the first time. You're very, very welcome. You've been sitting there. You've been very, very patient, and we do appreciate that. I suppose we've kind of got we've got the rural side, rural with Michael and John, and now we have the kind of the urban with yourself. What I suppose it is a busy time for yourselves on Fingal County Council. I suppose there's lots happening.
There is indeed, but I go back to the point that John said, and he said every day is a school day. And I'll tell you, I'm being taught tonight. One of the points you brought up about the decarbonisation down in Offaly, well, we're making up for it up here in Dublin West with our data centres and our computers and our the amount of energy we're using up here is half a little city on itself. One of those projects, actually, there was in part talked about as part of the Chief Executive's report, the reuse of the energy that's burnt and the heat that's being lost from those facilities. So at least they're looking into that, and they've got people looking at ways to be able to use that, renew that. But the other point in relation to the Community Gains Fund, there's another issue up in our area, which will be affecting ye all yet, and it's in relation to drones. So I'm sure you've heard about it already, and Mana is the name of the company, and they're dropping coffee and ice creams and burgers to back gardens all around Dublin 15 for the last year or so. So, it just occurred to me when you were talking there about the Community Gain Fund. And it's like with any of the projects, you can talk about any of the topics, that we'd be addressing. But if there's community buy-in, you need to get some sort of community buy-in to these things. So obviously there is the sponsorship and there's the locals, as you say, the jerseys and all that. But this issue has been contentious for a number of reasons. One is the privacy aspect of it. And, the drones flying over your head, and you mightn't mind it if they're delivering to your garden, but they're looking into your next door neighbour's garden as well. The other issue is the noise. And, you talk about the intrusion of, let's say, a wind turbine beside your football pitch. But if you're hearing like a motorbike flying over your house every day, so that there have been debates about that, and that is an issue that we obviously request. The council can't do much about it, only defer to the government regulations or to the Dublin or the airport authority. But that's one issue. Just when you were talking there, community gains, maybe that's an angle to go at with the drones and to see what they can sell to us. We were talking about the motions as well. I certainly think that the motions that Michael was talking about are well worthwhile, and I'd be certainly looking to be supporting them within my own council in the future, and hopefully we'll be able to talk further on them as well. And just in that, actually, the motion that I had presented this week to the council was in relation to homelessness. But one aspect of it, which wasn't addressed in my motion, is the animal aspect of it and the pets. You know, the pets aren't just for Christmas. But my fellow councillor down in Limerick, Sarah Beasley, had presented a motion recently where she was asking the council to if they held data on the number of houses or times people were allocated a house but were refused on the basis of their dog. And I know this personally myself, and now not a huge amount of times, but I know of people who have pets and they're looking for accommodation. They've been offered it, but they've been told if it's on the HAP system or whichever, that they won't actually accept animals. So they've had to make the choice as to whether to keep that animal or to get a house. You know, so people are talking, and that's just something that just of interest, just since we're talking about animals and animal cruelty, because I know myself, we've got 2 little dogs here. I'm surprised you couldn't hear them already, but 2 Barkers, Jack Russell and Jack Russell Collie Cross. But their family members, they are now, in fairness, they've kept them out in the kitchen. But they're family members, and I'd hate to think that, you know, if we, God forbid, you know, had to leave and had to go in to look for accommodation, that we'd have to get rid of that dog. So that's just something that I thought of there in relation to it. The question I had, as I said, my motion was in relation to housing. Again, the council, I feel, are trying to do their best. I feel in some ways they're restricted in what they can do and that there is only so much money. But we had a presentation the other day, and it was giving us all the figures and the number of houses here and the number of houses there. And it looked fantastic, and each one of the developments was brilliant and was welcome. But the issue that I'd have is it's not enough. And, you know, that's only from the phone that I'm on. I'm only the councillor a year, and yet I'd say one of the number one things that I'm requested is for housing. And it seems to be a constant, you know, you're on a list, you know, or all you can do is put them on a list. But just the other point that I was going to make was just in relation to that motion on Monday was our council meeting, and the motion wasn't in fact presented. There wasn't an opportunity for I think it was about 47, 49, 50, 52 motions, I think. And I think maybe they got through a handful of them. But actually, I'm not quite sure on the exact number, sorry now. But I know that I'd say not half of the motions were presented because of the Chief Executive's report. Now, there were other presentations that were made as well. But it has me wondering about the use of the time in the chamber for those type things. Like they could be separate presentations. That, you know, the Chief Executive could potentially make online, and you could watch it another time. Now, it is a good opportunity to ask questions in relation to it if you're given enough time to address it. But anyway, the point I'm making is that we didn't get to address that, and we'd hope for more time. But it's a big learning curve for me. I'm not putting in huge amounts of motions at this time, and hopefully I'll have the experience, the 2 lads, in the coming years.
From the motions that you see being put in, Gerard, are they kind of are some of them kind of really silly, kind of frivolous things, and when they should be really focusing on kind of more local?
Yeah, well, you know, there is the distinction even within the council between non-statutory and statutory motions. So those non-statutory motions, one which my colleague was presenting, which obviously didn't get at this council meeting, and in fact didn't get at the other one either, they're still worthwhile, you know, in that this one that my colleague, Councillor Ellen Troy, had presented was in relation to the presidential elections and the ability for our northern brethren to be able to vote in the presidential election. So, you know, when we do get the opportunity as councillors, I suppose we have to try and raise these issues by any means we can. And so it was a worthwhile motion, I think. But certainly there would be a number of motions that maybe aren't worthwhile and that feel like a bit of a waste of time. I wouldn't go judging anybody's motion. I'm sure some people might think mine is a bit of a waste of time too.
Yeah, can I just point out just something because Gerard just said it there. I had a motion for the County Council back in June. I sent a copy of it to you there, Gerard, looking for a change to the Residential Tenancy Act, Section 12 of the Residency Tenancy Act. And this is under Minister James Brown's department. Section 12 allows a landlord to deny somebody a tenancy on the grounds of pets. And the County Council would be under the same routine now. Our County Council here, like, they have a pretty liberal policy in terms of pets. Obviously, we have the prohibited breeds and that sort of stuff, but the smaller breeds, I think you're allowed up to 2 pets and doesn't deny it. But one of the areas, and this was kind of the law of unintended consequence, in that debate came up about people who are homeless. And we were saying, and in fairness, and it was Jim Codd was leading the charge on this one, and he's an Aontu councillor, he'd be a colleague of yours there, and he was saying that, you know, can the county council step in and take care of the animal while somebody is going through homeless services? Because locally here we have Osman House where men go and a shelter for women, but they don't allow pets. And because of the vulnerability of the people, 9 times out of 10, the only thing they have in this world that they love is their pet. And so they will not go into homeless services because they'll have to give up the one thing that they love. And we got that motion through. So that's an area that I think councillors can play a profound effect on it, because it really does matter to somebody. Like, and you know as well as I do, if you have dogs or something like that, and God forbid, if you're the only thing you had in your life was your dog, that's it. You know, you're not going to go for a house. You're not going to go into homeless services. You'll stay on the side of the street and you take your chances there rather than see the dog go somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. You know, animals, they're so important to people, and you know, it's actually, that was a good suggestion that the county council could support people that way with their pets. And I suppose Gerard as well, I suppose you're a relatively new councillor. You were elected back in June of 2024. How have you found the last year and a bit?
Well, I'd say if you saw me 6 months ago, you'd say, oh my God. Well, I'll tell you, I was overwhelmed and I was stressed to the nines. And like, you had so many requests coming in, especially in relation to issues like housing. And it feels as if your hands are tied and you can't do a thing. And, you know, you're sending on a letter and, you know, your people are literally at their wits' end. You know, they're like, I'm going to be kicked out of my house. And you feel, you know, they're looking to you and you're going, oh, you know, what can I do? And so I did now 6 months ago, I was a little bit overwhelmed, but also with the information that's out there. You know, it's going to take me a longer time than now to figure it all out. Like, even, for example, last Monday, the presentation by the chief executive, there was a good 60, 70, 80 page document that I had to have read in a couple of days before going into the meeting that I didn't get read. You know, I flicked through it and picked out some of the interesting issues. But I'm certainly not at the stage now where I know it all. You know, I'm certainly not. And in fairness to the council, when I do reach out, they do answer and they'll direct you as best they can. So they know it as well. And I think, in fairness to them, they're allowing me the baby steps. And, you know, like that, even the mistakes as well. So I'm hoping now within this year, I'll pick up the pace a little bit. But it is certainly a learning curve. The other issue for us locally is antisocial behaviour. And it's, you know, I'm sure it's a phenomenon, not just a big town area, it's everywhere across the country. Yeah. But it's antisocial behaviour is a big one. And what concerns me or related to that in my view, is sport and sporting facilities. So we've got a great basketball club up here. It's only about 10 years on, or well, actually a little bit more. But I'd say there's not one underage team that doesn't have 20, 30 lads waiting to get on it. Now, you know, the GEA team, it's a little bit different. We'll take you as quick as you come. But in certain aspects, like the swimming club, we're lucky enough as well in this locality to have a swimming pool not far from us. And also, again, a little bit further up the way, we've got the most fantastic facility, the National Sports Campus. But in those clubs, there's I think, now, I don't know, maybe I'm exaggerating or somebody was exaggerating when they told me, but there's something like 2,000 kids waiting to get on to learn how to swim. So, you know, there's there's that little gap there. So we sometimes say about antisocial behaviour, sure, there's loads for them to do. Isn't there the club down the road and this, that and the other? But there's still clubs. They can't cater for the numbers. And so what I'd be looking at with these community gains funds and everything else, but one thing that I'd be looking at is more outdoor facilities, especially to allow activities during the winter months. You know, the summer's fine. You can be on the pitch and you can do everything else. But when our lads, when the pitch, we're in council used lands, so we can't use the pitches during the winter months, you know, you just destroy them. So we're renting, you know, AstroTurf and everything else here. But even the cost of that, you know, is detrimental to some clubs, you know, that they'd use it more. But it is obviously the number of them that they're not available. But it sort of links one to the other. You know, you'd be talking about one crisis, another crisis, you know, antisocial behaviour, sport, homelessness, you know, they're all somewhat linked. And I found that over the last year, I'm starting to see even more so the link between them all.
Yeah, and John, of course, you were a development officer with Offaly, GAA. I suppose you'd share a lot of your sentiments there around the importance of having good facilities.
Yeah, Gerard's spot on, and he's targeting the right thing in terms of getting outdoor facilities. And he's touched on something there. Not everybody's into GAA either. Not everyone's into soccer. So like, there's various things out there that has to be explored. And particularly, it's amazing, like where like Gerard is talking about drones and whatnot. It seems like alien from what we be dealing with down here in rural. So it's amazing. You think we're all on the same page and we're all have the same issues, but we don't. Like so. Gerard, I don't know. That's a different world altogether when you have drones flying into the yards and whatnot.
It's going to come to you. It's going to come to you.
Yeah. So that's kind of So it must be like it'll all just that's the trend. But just going back to it there in terms of facilities, I suppose it's very, very difficult up where Gerard is to get that. You know, land is such prime, and getting that space, that recreational space. If it hasn't been planned 50 years ago, it's very difficult to get it now. Whereas we're very fortunate down in our area where there's any amount of land. Do you know what I'm saying? And someone is always willing to see the community right and give land. So it's it's amazing listening to the contrast between the urban and the rural. Like we have similar issues in terms of housing and maybe like some environmental issues, but when it comes to recreational and how society is changing, it's totally different altogether.
And sure, you're a representative for Ongar. I'm sure it's like a lot of communities in Dublin West. It's growing at a rapid pace, and I suppose it's trying to get the facilities and infrastructure to keep up with that is the challenge.
Yeah, and this one of the things that sort of prompted me into politics was that, for example, my daughter started in primary school in a porta cabin. And, you know, the school was eventually built and a fine school now. It's a shared facility, great way to go as well. It's shared with the community centre during the night and the evening and the weekends, and the school then during the week. So it's a fantastic facility, a great model for, I think, across the country or for use of halls, etc. But the point was, you know, that's just one example where they knew the population, like they've access to this CSO statistics. We all do. You can see a population growth. Anybody could have told you. And it's the same with the housing. Like you're looking at this, like, you know, there's another 100,000 extra people in Ireland and the growth and population, etc., etc. But in our area as well, we've got a new train station. This was built but it was about 3 years before they built the road into it. And it was that sort of lack of planning, that it just sort of irks me. And I can't get it, from, again, you're looking at these statistics or you're looking at something coming down the road, you should be preparing for it. But what I find, or what I seem to see Irish politics is anyway, or the government is, you wait for a crisis and then you deal with it. As opposed to, lads, look down there now, we know there's a problem coming, and let's prepare for that. But what seems to happen in nearly everything, and I think housing is the thing at the moment, but there is a crisis. It's an emergency. And it's still, that now maybe we'll try and do something about it. But in our area, it's very rapidly growing and growing faster. It's going to expand even more now. There's huge developments. There's going to be another mini town anyway, built right beside where I am. And then you've got access to schools. So that's the issues. So you've got, this estate isn't in the catchment area of that school. And, there's all sorts of trouble with that. But in saying that, at the very same time, there's a certain amount of forward thinking in it as well. I mean, the infrastructure is there for cycling. The buses need to be developed. There is the Bus Connect service is being developed at the moment. And then there's the active travel is fairly active within Fingal as well. So there are pluses as well. The area is a lovely, welcoming area, very diverse area. All of West Dublin is as well. I'd say in most areas now, it's almost 50-50. And,
Right.
that's sort of the way it is. So I know that from the churches and each of the churches in the area, there's 4 parishes effectively within this area. You see it from the schools. My kids are still in primary school, secondary school. But it's a growing area, very new. But it has great potential as well.
Absolutely. And Michael, I suppose from listening to John and Gerard there, I suppose you've been in councillor since 1999. There's a lot that you have seen as regards forward planning. How
There is,
do we
Paul,
fare out?
well, like we're kind of mixed between, like in County Wexford, we're mixed. On second area, you got some dogs going a bit crazy. There you go.
Yeah.
Apologies for that. At least you know it's live.
Oh yeah.
We have similar situation, but the problem we have is that any development down, and you'll probably have this too, any development in rural Ireland now is at the mercy of Uisce Éireann. So we have villages, right? We have villages that are going to die and be gone because Irish Water will not give permission for either development built infrastructure or do the infrastructure itself. And, Gerard talks about schools expanding and access to schools. We have schools that are going to be dead in 3 to 5 years because of demographic change. Obviously, the kids are getting older and moving on. And there's no new families coming in to replace them because there's no new housing, because there's no water infrastructure. And the consequence on that will be the local GAA team, the local shop, the local village will absolutely struggle on it. So, we see it in that way. The difficulty I have and the difficulty I see going 5 years, 10 years down the line is when we go into choppy waters and there is no money for all of the different programs at the government. My concern is as a society and as a country that different people are going to start turning on different groups and saying it's all your fault. And my worry is, and particularly in areas of huge diversity and like 50-50 diversity is, that's a huge challenge to try and keep the equilibrium and keep the peace and keep everything going there. My concern is what happens when the money runs dry? You know what I mean? Do people start looking, are we going to have a circular firing squad where everyone's blaming everyone else? And that, sure, look, you're taking our jobs and you're taking our houses, you're taking this and that and the other thing. And, the difficulty you have. The other thing is with the drones, I don't know if anybody saw it, but Sky News had a kind of special report, ran it, I think, all day yesterday about drones in Britain, particularly around the prisons, dropping things off in the middle of the night. And they had a huge expo on that. And while John and I are kind of safe from that at the moment, Certainly Dublin, you're not, and it's only a matter of time before it rolls out around the country, and that's going to bring, that's going to bring a lot of changes, and it's going to bring a lot of challenges to us. The other side of the coin is, and maybe it's just I'm getting old and cranky, Paul, I don't know, is that do you
I
really
wouldn't say
need
that.
do you really need fast food delivered by a drone? Do you really need a cup of coffee delivered? Like, get out, go down, get involved in your community. That's, it's great progress and it's great crack to see it all. It's a novelty there, but really, do we really need to have food delivered by a drone? And like, can we not just get out and get in the car and go into town and, keep the
You
towns
need
living?
somebody.
Because,
Yeah,
yeah, well,
exactly.
you see, the difficulty is like, and in your area, Gerard, it probably doesn't apply, but John certainly would, and certainly applies to Ross. Like, you could go into the main street or the middle of the town at 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, and it used to be absolutely jammed with people, and now maybe four, maybe five people on it, and there's just like an awful silence, like a deafening silence on the main streets of town because people aren't out on the towns anymore, and they're shopping, their whole consumer patterns are changing, and like you don't have this in Dublin West yet, but you certainly will. It's like we are absolutely fighting to do everything we can to keep the town centres open, but people are just their patterns are changing.
Absolutely, and John, in off in Offaly, I'm sure you experienced the same thing. Town centres, coming under pressure.
Oh yeah, massively so. But like it wasn't Tullamore. I don't like being critical, but they come up with this plan of having these big industrial parks out, retail parks on the outer edge of the town. So you drive out maybe a mile and a half. You have everything that you want. Next thing, what happens is there's a takeaway. There's a sports shop. There's the next thing. There's numerous filling stations. There's Tesco. There's Aldi, Lidl. Next thing, the whole centre of the town is just gone. So we've seen that. Now, I have to say that I have seen massive progress in Offaly with our smaller towns where the footfall had gone, businesses closed down. And I suppose it takes a collaboration with the council and the owners and whatnot. And I know they're going down the line of compulsory purchase orders for certain buildings in certain towns and whatnot. But I am starting to see a major footfall starting to come back into most of them towns because the developers are coming in, putting the commercial unit back into a residential unit. There's a bit of life coming back into it. My own town, for example, there was 7 buildings, one after the other, where there was nobody, absolutely nobody in them. And by the middle of next year, they will all be full. Just sitting down and maybe talking to developers and saying, listen, lads, you can pick up a grant here, you can do this, that, and the other. Some of them didn't even pick up the grant, but the fact that you put the pieces together and start looking at it from that point of view, we started to see major development. I think, Paul, ultimately the small towns and villages, and I think Michael and Gerard would agree, the small towns will never be as vibrant as they were 20, 30 years ago. They'll be just very much trying to get people back living in the buildings that are there, try to get the footfall going. I think people ultimately will go and do their major shops or their, you know what I'm saying? Like you take, for example, you might have a small convenience shop in a town. Someone's coming home from work, they're dropping into Tesco, they're getting 10 or 12 items, or they're doing a major shop because
True, yeah.
life is so busy, and they're coming back home then and they're getting inside the door. And I absolutely couldn't agree with more Michael. And I think Michael probably will have emotion on it, is ban drones. Because I tell you one thing, if they're landing around the rural areas, I am telling you one, there will be pulled out of the sky because privacy is a big thing in rural Ireland.
Big
People are
time, yeah.
very in Dublin, right? Fair enough. No disrespect to anyone in Dublin, but they're a standard back garden, but maybe a garden shed. When you're in rural Ireland and you have a trailer and you have a plot of turf and you have something over here and a quad, I tell you one thing, I don't think the drones that last too long in the sky.
Exactly. And there's huge privacy and GDPR issues as well.
Massive.
Like,
Massive. But Michael's right. Like, do we need to go? Like, really and truly, if we look at it from a society, and Jared touched on it, and Michael said it as well, get out and meet somebody. Like, sure, if we go down this line, sure, when will you ever leave home? We already have remote working, and you can see the way employers are starting to say now they're seeing productivity is absolutely gone. People's mental health and physical health is gone. They're starting to see now that people are not getting out and moving as much, and it's a
yeah,
big problem at the moment.
yeah. And Jerry wanted to come in there, I think. Yeah. Great,
No.
Gentlemen,
great.
just before you do, Gerard, I'm going to have to take my dues. So listen, it's been great to see you, Gerard. Best of luck. We're here for you if we can have any help. But
Thanks so much.
John, no bothers. And John, we'll be talking to you again. And Paul, sorry, but I have to leg it.
No problem.
Good
Thanks
stuff,
a million.
Michael.
God bless
Thanks a
to
million,
you.
Michael.
Take care,
Thanks.
lads. Have a good weekend.
Likewise,
You're
Michael.
very welcome.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
And I suppose, to give you the last word, John, you've 16 years of experience on Offaly County Council. You're
Newbie.
a councillor, a newbie. I suppose if there's any bit of advice you could give John to Ger, I suppose, as if he
Yeah, I
kind of
suppose. Yeah,
finds
Gerard
his
touched
feet.
on it there. Yeah, Gerard touched on it off air. He was saying maybe that he just feels that from his perspective, he's sitting back and maybe not saying too much. And we're all been there. And I think the big thing for any newbie that's in the chamber is to sit back, absorb it. Don't feel that you have to say something. It takes 2 or 3 years before you actually understand the process of things. And you think you might know it, but it's changing so often. And even for us as councillors, experienced councillors, it's when you get into the system and you start understand how it operates, and then there's changes. There are minor changes, but to you at the moment they're big changes because you're trying to understand the whole system. And I would say, Gerard, just keep doing what you're doing, put your motions in, get your speaking time, get used to speaking in the chamber. It's very daunting. People, even the most experienced people that come into the chamber and they would be good public speakers and very adaptable to what they can do in terms of in the public. But when they come in and with their peers and sitting there and you're trying to talk about policy and changes and get your point across, it's not simple. It does take years. And I think if you identify that it takes years and don't beat yourself up over it, you will learn over time. But people don't realize and don't give politicians enough credit for, and you've talked about the chief executive through 60, 70-page document that you impossible to go through, but you have to try to summarize it and you have to try to take a bit from it and listen in the chamber. But there's a huge amount of learning in Nepal, and people don't give local county councillors the credit for what actually they have to do in terms of adapting to how the system works. And then if they know how the system works, then they know how to deal with the problems. But sometimes what happens is Gerard is trying to deal with a problem and trying to understand the system, whereas I'm very, very fortunate in the fact that when someone comes to me with a problem, I nearly know the answer because I know the system. So
Yeah.
be patient, Gerard.
Yeah.
Like,
Good advice.
yeah, exactly. That's some great advice, and you definitely, Michael, John, from chatting to you, county councillors, they are, the, the hidden powerhouse within our democracy here in Ireland, because so much, you know, when something happens, let's say at the high government level, it's the county councillors that have to deal with the impact of it, be it good or bad, on the ground, So I think the roles of county councillor is totally kind of maybe not given the full recognition that it should, and that's what we're here trying to do here on the Irish political round. Well, I'd like to say a big thank you to Councillor John Leahy, who's also Cathaoirleach of Offaly County Council, to Councillor Michael Sheehan of Wexford County Council, and to County Councillor on Fingal Council, Gerard Sheehan. Thank you very much for taking the time to chat to us here on the Irish Political Roundup. And like I said, thank you to my colleague Roisin Cleric, who unfortunately couldn't be with us this evening. I'd like to say thank you to our viewers for taking the time to sit down and watch us here on the Irish Political Roundup. It's always great to hear your feedback, and it's always brilliant for you to take the time to just check out what's happening on the Irish political scene. So from me, Paul Brophy, have a great evening, and we will talk soon.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Paul.